Hello everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel. Now we are going to learn exception clause with no exception and multiple exceptions, user defined exceptions. This video is presented by N. Harshapriyanjali, T. Pranati and B. Ushodaya under the guidance of Dr. M. Prasad, Associate Professor in the Department of CSC in Sri Vishnu Engineering College for Women, Bhimavaram.
Our topic is exception clause with no exception and multiple exceptions, user defined exceptions. Firstly, let us know about errors and exceptions. As we already know, errors are the problems in a program due to which the program will stop the execution. On the other hand, exceptions are handled when some interval events occur, which changes the normal flow of the program. Here, the errors are classified into two types. The first one is syntax errors and the next one is logical errors. These logical errors are also termed as exceptions. Coming to syntax errors. When the proper syntax of the language is not followed, then a syntax error is thrown. Let us go through an example program. Here in the example program, we are going to write a program about age factor that influences the vote eligibility. In the program, after the if clause, indentation is not followed. Since indentation comes under syntax error, in the output it shows us an invalid syntax. This is an example for syntax error. It returns a syntax message because of it returns a syntax error message because after the if statement a colon is missing. We can fix this by writing the correct syntax. Hence, syntax errors are fixed by writing the correct syntax. Coming to logical errors. As we already know, these are also called as exceptions. When in the runtime, an error that occurs after passing the syntax test is called exception or logical type. For example, when we divide any number by 0, then the zero division error exception is raised. Or when we import a module that does not exist, then import error is raised. Let us understand the logical errors with an example program. Here consider the example program. Here we are going to divide marks by 0. Since division by 0 is not possible, here zero division error is raised by the compiler, I mean the interpreter. Let us go through some predefined exceptions. In Python, there are some predefined exceptions that are already defined in the language itself. Exception, attribute error, EOF error, IO error, etc. are some of the predefined exceptions. Each has its own importance. For example, like index error. Index error is raised when you are going to list an index that is not present in any list tuple or any other thing. Then in such cases, index errors are raised. The last one is zero division error in the given list. We already saw an example regarding this zero division error.
Now let's see what is an exception clause. An exception clause is a block of code that handles exceptions that may occur during program execution. In Python, we use the try except statement to create exception clauses. The try block contains the code that may raise an exception, while the except block contains the code that handles the exception if it occurs. Exception clauses are important because they allow us to gracefully handle errors and prevent our programs from crashing. Without them, our programs would simply stop executing when an error occurs, which is not ideal. Now, let's see the block diagram. If an exception is raised, then we check the handler. If it is found, then program control is transferred to handler. Otherwise, program is terminated and error message is displayed. If exception is not raised, then program executes normally. Now, Try statement works as follows. Step 1. First, the try block statements between the try and except keywords is executed. If no exception occurs, the except block is skipped. If an exception occurs during execution of any statement in the try block, then rest of the statements in the try block are skipped. If the exception type matches the exception named after the except keyword, the except block is executed and then execution continues after the try statement. If an exception occurs which does not match the exception named in the except block, then it is passed on to outer try block in case of nested try blocks. If no exception handler is found in the program, then it is an unhandled exception and the program is terminated with an error message. Now let's see an example. Just we check the statement. If an exception is raised, then it will print exception caught. Otherwise, if exception is not raised, then else block will be executed. If exception is raised or not, finally will compulsory be executed. Python try except. Try. Try will execute or run this code, except when an exception is raised, then it will execute that block. Else, if no exception, then this code will be run. And finally, always this code will be executed even if an error is executed or not. How to use the except block with no exceptions. If we define except clause with no exceptions, it can handle all types of exceptions. However, neither it's a good coding practice nor it is recommended. Example program. We take two inputs I and j. Let's divide that two inputs and store that in k. Since it is not possible to divide any number by 0, so we get a 0 division error. Exception is raised, so division by error is not possible will be displayed.
Now let's see the exception clause with multiple exceptions, that is with multiple except blocks. Python allows multiple except blocks for a single try block. The block which matches with the exception generated will get executed. A try block can be associated with more than one except block to specify handlers for different exceptions. However, only one handler will get executed. Now here is the syntax for exception clause with multiple exceptions. Here a try block is present and multiple number of except blocks are present, and an else block is also present. If there is any exceptions, then that particular exceptions except block is executed. If there are no any exceptions, then a try block and else block will get executed. Now let us see an example for exception clause with multiple exceptions. Now I'm writing keyword try and writing some statements into the try block. Now we are writing except keyword, and in this except we are taking the exception as 0 division error we are taking here as an exception. This is a predefined exception. If this was our exception, then let's print denominator cannot be 0. Now let's write another except block. With index error as its exception. If this was the exception, then let us print as index out of bound. Now let's execute this. That is, we are running this code. Yes, here is our output. Index out of bound. Here we have given even numbers of 5, but in this even number set we have taken only 4 numbers in that list, but we are asking 5th indexed number, so we are exceeding the index, so we get index error as its exception. So we print this except block. Index out of bound is our output. Now let's see exception clause with multiple exceptions in single block. An except clause may name multiple exceptions as a parenthesized tuple. When an exception is raised out of the 3 exceptions specified, the same except block will be executed. If we want the same code to execute for all 3 exceptions, then we use this kind. Now let's see the example. Here a try block is written, and here we are asking the user to give an input, that is as enter the numerator. Now we are asking to print n square. Now except block is written. Here except block means in this except block we are given 3 exceptions at a time. This is called multiple exceptions in single block. Here we given the 3 exceptions are keyboard interrupt, value error, type error. If we get any 3 of these exceptions, then we can get an output as exception occurred, check the output. Here an output we entered the numerator as D. Here if we print it, it will get an error. So we'll get an error. So we printed except block as output. User defined exceptions. Python allows programmers to create their own exceptions by creating a new exception class. The new exception class is derived from the base exception which is predefined in Python. Init method of exception class can be overridden by the new class. The customized exception class can be used to perform any task. Creating our own class and defining a user-defined exception is known as custom exception. An exception can be a string class. Mostly there are classes with an argument which is the instance of the class. As is a keyword that allows programmers to name a variable within an except statement. Now let's see an example for user-defined exceptions. Now let's create a class named myError. Which is derived from exception class. Now let's write the code in it. Now let's ask the user to enter input as input for age. Now if age greater than or equals to 18, then let us print you are eligible for voting. Else, let's try block, raise my error, of age. Now except block is written with exception my error as a. In this, let us print your age is now not eligible to vote. Now let's run this. Now let's enter our output as 4. So your age is 4, so not eligible to vote. Let's again run this. Now let's enter the age as 67. Yes, you are eligible for voting. This is the best example for user-defined exceptions. Here, user-defined exception we created as my error. It is derived from exception class. Okay, thank you.